This is demo number 3 for the linear perspective project for Intro to Drawing. So at this point I am done with my pencil sketching on my drawing. So since last time, where I left it last time is I'd gotten all the perspective lines in perfect. What I've done since last time, you can see like the table and the cushions, I've rounded out the corners a little bit. I've gone in and drawn in more details of the things that aren't like perfectly in perspective. So like the plants, the tomatoes in the bowl, I've made sure the bowls are perfect, the curtains, I've kind of drawn out. And I've also erased all the imaginary lines, all the perspective lines I had drawn out that I don't want to ink. Now I haven't erased them perfectly, you can still see them, because at the end, after I'm done inking, I'm going to completely erase all the pencil lines. So basically I just need to get it to the point where the lines in my drawing are the lines that I want to ink, and that I don't have any lines that I'm going to accidentally ink and that don't belong in the drawing. And so there were a few things, like the record was really sketchy, so I made sure I kind of figured out what the exact line I wanted for the record was, and everything connects in my drawing. So I've got the lines how I want it. So now what I want to do is I want to ink the drawing, but we want to use line variation to make this a little bit more interesting than it already is. So over here, I believe I asked you to get 3 different ink pens of different weights. Ideally, you have a thin one, a medium one, and a thick one. And the reality is those can shift in one direction or the other. I've got 5 here, but I'm only going to use 3. So you can see the differences in them. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start with this medium one, and I'm going to do all my main lines in the medium one. So like all the room perspective lines, the window, things like that. But I'm going to leave the like kind of additional lines or some of the detail lines, and those are going to be done with my thinnest one. And then once I've done most of the main lines and then gone on and done the thin ones, I'm going to come back with my really thick one, and I'm going to decide which lines do I want to emphasize. So hopefully there will be 3 different widths of lines. Now, just like with your pencil, you can actually get different thicknesses with the same pen. So this is the number 5. If I go really slowly, it almost feels as thick as the medium right here. If I go really fast, it almost feels thinner than the number 3 here. So, and if I just kind of go at a normal pace, it feels medium. If I go too quick, I actually get like that kind of ragged edge that looks like when you use a marker and it starts to dry out, so I don't want that. So you just want to kind of be aware that like you can use a variety of lines, a variety of widths of pen, but depending on how you're using it, you're actually getting a variety of lines. So ultimately, I want to be able to see 3 different widths of lines in your drawing. And as always, with everything you're doing in this drawing, any line that is meant to be straight, you need to draw with a ruler. So I'm just going to go in and start drawing some of these lines with my pen. Okay, so I've got the lines of my window in, and now what I'm gonna go is I think these indent lines I wanna do with my lighter pen, the thinner pen. So I'm gonna go in and add those lines with the thinner to start to create some variation. Now you'll notice there's a few areas where I actually went a little too quick. So ideally there was a couple lines I went back and redid because I was starting to get that ragged look, that kind of dry look, which I don't want. And there was a couple areas where I wasn't very careful, so I kind of had to adjust the lines a little bit to make sure that they connected. So make sure you follow your perspective lines really well. Okay, so now that I've got the thinner lines in, so ideally I would have done the medium lines over the whole thing first, then the thin lines, and then gone back in and thought, okay, what lines do I really want to emphasize? And I think what I want to emphasize is this line kind of around the edge, just that outline of the window, and I think I want to emphasize the room lines. So I'm going to use this thick pen to go back over those lines. To really highlight them. You want to be careful because once you draw a line, it's permanent. And you'll notice that I'm flipping the paper around to make it easier to draw those lines straight. And sometimes I like to draw lines upside down if I want to compare it to a line, because my ruler covers these lines. So I'm going to compare it to this line. So by flipping the paper around, I can actually kind of see what I want to compare it to. So if the ruler's covering something that you want to see, just flip it all around. Okay, so I can kind of start to see how I'm getting that variation in line, and I like it. It's not like super dramatic. We're not going for like thick here. We want to keep our thin, crisp lines because this is a pristine drawing. So pretend I've filled in all of this. The very last step is to take an eraser and to erase all your pencil lines so it's just the ink lines. Now, one thing you want to be really careful of is that if you're erasing really vigorously, it's easy to crinkle your paper. And again, you've spent so much time making this drawing pristine. We don't want to do that. So we're just gonna go in, double check that your white eraser isn't black. If it's black, it's gonna make marks on the paper. So we're just gonna go in and very carefully rub. You also wanna make sure that your ink is totally dry. I think I just smudged a little bit of ink there. So it can be good to give your ink like 10 minutes to dry before you erase, otherwise you're gonna smudge. And firmly but gently, just erase all those bits, and you're gonna have some like smudges from your hands. You wanna erase all of that as well. So I'm just going over the window right now. So you can see the difference between the medium and the thin lines start to stand out. And if they don't stand out enough, I can always go back over them. I don't want to erase my coffee pot too much because I want to be able to draw that in later. But the lines really start to come out nice and clean. And then, whether you blow on it or you rub it off, get all those eraser bits off before you take a picture. And usually, like you do, you erase the whole thing and then you kind of got to look at it and go back in and erase the things that you missed. But do you see how like pretty and clean and nice that is? Oops. So that's what happens when you smudge with your eraser. So sometimes it's nice to have a separate piece of paper where you clean off your eraser, get all those black smudges off, and then go back into your paper with that clean eraser. Okay, so imagine this over the whole thing. It's clean, it's pristine, there's different weights of line to kind of pull out different parts and make it feel structured and interesting. There's a couple moments of emphasis that aren't just perspective lines that kind of draw interest into the space. All my perspective lines are perfect. This drawing takes a lot of work, but it looks so cool in the end. So good job, pat yourself on the back and then take a picture. Make sure you desaturate it and bring up the contrast. So you really want to like push the contrast on this so your paper feels white and your black pen feels super black. And then turn it in. I'm excited to see these. Good job.